The moment the light went out, something inside me snapped. All the rational thoughts, all the calming voices in my head, gone. There was only instinct now. I curled tighter behind the water heater, pressing my back to the cold concrete wall. I could hear my heartbeat in my ears, and I could hear the steps. They reached the bottom of the stairs and paused. It was pitch black. I couldn't see them, and they couldn't see me, not unless they had night vision or weren't quite human. Then the footsteps started again. Slow, crunching gravel on the floor. One step, then another. A pause. Breathing. I covered my mouth. Something brushed a shelf near me. A jar shattered on the floor with a sharp crack. The figure didn't flinch. Instead, it whispered again. Low, measured, too calm. You shouldn't have come back. The voice was wrong. Not deep, not threatening. It sounded almost tired, like a whisper echoing from another time. Familiar and unfamiliar at once. They moved closer. I heard the soft squeak of rubber soles. I needed to act. I reached slowly behind me and found an old rusted pipe on the floor. I gripped it tightly, inching my foot back along the wall, trying not to breathe too loudly. Then I heard it. Not the footsteps, not the whisper. A voice, a second voice, coming from upstairs. A child's voice. Grandma. My blood turned to ice. There was no child here. No one but me and whoever was down here. The figure froze. Then, slowly, it turned and began ascending the stairs again, like it had been called. I waited until I was sure the steps had stopped. Then I crept out from behind the heater, using the faint light from the storm outside filtering through the basement window. I found a fuse box, flipped the main switch. The light buzzed back on. Weak, but enough. I looked around and saw them. Footprints. Not just one. Dozens. Bare, wet footprints on the floor, leading to the corner of the basement where the old storm drain was, where the concrete was cracked, where the house always smelled dampest. I followed them. There, in the corner, I found something buried under rotting tarp. A small wooden crate. Inside were old clothes, tiny shoes, a child's dress, mud-stained, water-damaged, and next to them, an old, leather-bound diary. I flipped it open. The name on the first page stopped me cold. Clara Whitmore, 1952. My grandmother's sister. The one who went missing when she was 7 years old. The one no one talked about. The diary's pages were warped from moisture, but the ink had held up surprisingly well. I flipped through it in the flickering light, heart hammering, every cell in my body screaming that I shouldn't be doing this. But I needed to know. Clara's handwriting was small and careful. March 12, 1952. It's raining again. Mama says not to play near the old well, but I saw someone there last night. A girl with black hair. She waved at me. March 15th, 1952. The girl says her name is Lily. She's nice. She said I could come with her if I wanted. She says Grandma used to go with her too when she was a little girl. March 17th, 1952. Lily says I should open the window tonight. She says she doesn't like locked windows. I flipped ahead. April 2nd, 1952. I told Mama about Lily. She slapped me and said not to talk about her. She cried in the kitchen all night. I heard her say not again. April 5th, 1952. I don't care. I want to see Lily. She says Grandma kept her locked in the basement once. She says it's my turn now. The last entry, April 6th, 1952. I opened the window. I dropped the diary. My hand was trembling. I looked down at the wet clothes, the tiny shoes, the cracked floor where the storm drain was, and I realized Clara never left this house. She died here, Always, she stayed. And something stayed with her. Suddenly, the sound of footsteps returned. Not upstairs. Behind me. I turned. There, at the edge of the light, stood a small figure. Soaking wet. Pale. Eyes too wide. Too dark. She tilted her head at me. "You read my book," she said. I stumbled back, nearly slipping on the wet floor. The pipe fell from my hand and clanged to the ground. The girl stepped closer. "It's your turn now." I ran, up the stairs, through the kitchen, toward the front door. I didn't look back. I didn't want to see her face again. I yanked the door open into the storm and didn't stop running, barefoot into the mud, the cold, the rain. I didn't stop until I reached the road and flagged down a passing car. My mind reeled. I stayed at the footprint. Muddy, unmistakable, human. No shoes. Just the bare imprint of toes and heel, dark against the old hardwood. I instinctively stepped back, nearly slipping on the wet floor. Someone had come in through the window. Or maybe they were already inside. I backed out of the room and shut the door quickly, my fingers fumbling over the handle. The old brass lock clicked into place with a metallic snap. It felt useless, that flimsy lock, but I needed the gesture. I needed the illusion of safety. I should have called someone. The police, maybe. A neighbor, even. But in that moment, I felt paralyzed, caught between fear and denial. It was almost like my brain was trying to rationalize the irrational. Maybe the footprint was old. Maybe a raccoon had come in. Maybe it wasn't what it seemed. But then I heard something that shattered all denial. A soft thump, like something falling. From inside the attic. I hadn't been up there in years. The attic door was a square panel in the ceiling at the end of the hallway, with one of those pull-down ladders. I crept toward it, flashlight shaking in my hand. The rain pounded harder against the roof now, echoing like distant thunder overhead. I stood under the attic hatch and stared. Silence. Then, scratch. A slow, dragging sound. Something scraping across the attic floor above me. I ran. I bolted back down the stairs, my breath coming in shallow gasps. My phone nearly slipped from my hand as I fumbled to call 911. But the screen stayed black. No signal. Not even one bar. I turned the Wi-Fi on. Nothing. The storm must have knocked it out. Always, someone had cut the line. I stood in the foyer, my back to the front door, trying to calm down. The logical part of me was dying, suffocating under the weight of primal terror. My grandmother's house suddenly didn't feel like home anymore. It felt like a trap. I needed to leave. Get in the car, drive to town, get help. I rushed to the side table where I'd left my keys. They weren't there. I always left them in the bowl by the lamp. They were gone. I checked the floor, the couch, under the table. Nothing. Then I noticed something else missing. My boots by the door. And that's when I saw it. The front door's deadbolt was unlocked. I hadn't left it like that. My breathing slowed to shallow huffs as I reached forward and through the bolt. I needed to protect myself, at least until morning. I ran to the kitchen, grabbed the largest knife from the drawer. Then I turned off every light and crouched behind the couch in the dark, phone in one hand, blade in the other. The only sound was the rain. And then, the creak of stairs. Someone was coming down. I froze. Each step was slow, deliberate, heavy. Wood groaned under the weight. I couldn't see the staircase from the living room, but I could hear everything. I didn't dare breathe. Then it stopped. Silence. A long, stretching silence that seemed to pull time apart. Then, the sound of something soft brushing against the wall. Fabric. Fingertips. I waited, crouched, every muscle tight as wire. Then I heard something that nearly made me scream. My name whispered. Not shouted, not spoken, just whispered. Emily. I hadn't told anyone I was here. No one but the lawyer and a distant cousin even knew I'd moved in. Emily, I know you're awake. I gripped the knife tighter. My heart was hammering so loud I thought it would give me away. Whoever was in the house, they weren't trying to steal. They were looking for me. A sudden noise, thump, like a chair tipping over, made me flinch. It came from the kitchen. Too close. I had to move. I crawled quietly across the living room floor, slipping behind the curtain near the back window. I gently pulled it aside and remembered the window was locked. I couldn't open it without making noise. I heard footsteps behind me. Emily. The voice was closer now, right behind the couch. I did the only thing I could. I ran. Through the dining room, into the hallway, past the stairs, to the basement door. It was the only place left. I slammed the door behind me and ran down the steps 2 at a time. The air was damp and cold, the concrete slick underfoot. I flicked on the single dangling bulb. It buzzed and flickered weakly to life. The basement hadn't changed since I was a child. Same shelves full of dusty jars. Same old furnace. Same smell of mold and rust. I ducked behind the water heater and tried to steady my breathing. Above me, the basement door creaked open. Footsteps. Slow, deliberate, coming down. The bulb flickered once, then went out. Total darkness. I've always hated rainy nights. There's something about the sound of rain hitting the windows, the way the shadows seem longer and deeper in the flickering light of the streetlights. That particular night, a Thursday in late October, it was raining like that. Heavy, cold, and steady. The kind of rain that weighed down the air and made you believe something terrible was about to happen. I was alone in my grandmother's house. She had died 3 months earlier, and I had inherited the old house on Willow Street. A 2-story Victorian with creaky floors, lots of rooms, and windows that never quite closed. She'd lived there for nearly 60 years, and the house hadn't changed a bit since the 70s. Dusty pink wallpaper, antique furniture, and old oil paintings of people I'd never met staring back at you from the hallway walls. I had recently moved there. After a bad breakup and a mental burnout from work, I had decided to take a break from the city. The house felt both comforting and strange. I had been there many times as a child, but being alone there, especially at night, made me feel like I didn't belong. It was as if someone or something still lived there with me. That night, I made myself a cup of tea, lay down on the living room couch, and listened to the rain. The wind howled through the trees, occasionally knocking a branch against the house. The electricity had flickered once or twice, but it hadn't gone out yet. I was watching an old mystery movie, something black and white, and I was half listening as I scrolled through my phone. That's when I heard a tapping sound. Not from the branches, not from the ceiling, from the window. A knock, knock, a quiet, deliberate knock, as if someone were knocking, slowly, on a door every few seconds. The sound came from the window behind the old armchair across the room. The curtains were drawn, but the sound was unmistakable. I muted the television and listened. Knock, knock. Maybe it was a branch, I thought. Or maybe water dripping in a strange way. But the rhythm was so regular, so human. I stood up slowly, my bare feet soundless on the carpet. My hand hovered near the curtain. I didn't want to open it. Every part of me screamed at me not to look. But the logical part of my brain, the part that still believed in logic, won out. I pulled the curtain aside with a swift movement. No one was there. Just the backyard, dark and empty. It was raining. The porch light illuminated a small area just outside the window. Wet grass, the edge of the patio, a few bushes. Nothing else. I exhaled and laughed to myself. But then I realized something. The window was open. It wasn't wide, just an inch or two. But it was enough. I knew I hadn't opened it. In fact, I had checked all the windows earlier that day because of the weather forecast. This one was closed. I reached over and closed it and locked it. Then I checked the rest of the first floor. All the windows were locked. The doors were locked. Nothing unusual. Something was bothering me, though. That window wasn't just locked, it was open. I hadn't left it like that. Trying to shake off the discomfort, I returned to the couch, but the moment had passed. The cozy mood had been shattered. I kept looking out the window. I listened. The tapping had stopped. The rain was still falling. And then I heard a creak. A low, unmistakable creak. The floorboards above me, on the second floor. I froze. The house was quiet sometimes, of course. But this wasn't quiet. There was the sound of footsteps. A deliberate footstep, just above the living room. The guest bedroom. My grandmother's old room. I picked up my phone, turned on my flashlight, and slowly climbed the stairs. Each step creaked under my weight. The hallway was dark. I hadn't turned on the upstairs lights. My heart was pounding so hard I could feel it in my throat. I reached the guest bedroom door. It was slightly ajar. I opened it with my fingertips. The room was empty. The dusty bed, the old wardrobe, the lace curtains fluttering slightly from the open window. The open window. Again, this one was wide open. The rain had soaked the old carpet beneath. I ran forward and slammed it shut. I locked it. My hands were shaking. This wasn't a mistake. This wasn't forgetfulness. Someone had opened the windows. While I was downstairs. While I was in the house. And that's when I noticed a single, wet footprint on the wooden floor right by the window. The man who picked me up on the side of the road must have thought I was insane. I was barefoot, soaked through, shivering, and wild-eyed. I must have repeated, "There's someone in the house," at least a dozen times on the drive to the police station. He tried to calm me, offered me a blanket from his truck, but I barely heard him. At the station, I gave my statement. I told them everything. The open windows, the muddy footprints, the voice, the diary, the girl. I must have sounded delirious, but they humored me. 2 officers went out to the house. They didn't find anyone inside. No signs of forced entry. No footprints. No child. Not even the muddy ones I'd seen with my own eyes. The back window upstairs, shut and locked. The basement, empty. The box, the clothes, the diary, all gone. I insisted. I begged them to check again. They did. Still nothing. One of the officers, Officer Talbot, older, gruff, with a kind but skeptical face, pulled me aside when his partner wasn't looking. "That house," he said, "has a reputation. Been called out there a few times over the years. Strange noises, windows opening, people going missing. But nothing ever sticks. No evidence." I asked him about Clara, my grandmother's sister. He nodded slowly. Clara Whitmore. Went missing in '52. Never found. But everyone around here knew the story. He paused. Some folks think she never left the house. I didn't go back. Not to pack. Not to sell. I called a realtor and gave her power of attorney. I never set foot inside that house again. I moved back to the city, found a small apartment downtown. It took months for me to feel safe again. Even then, the memory of that voice, soft, girlish, patient, haunted me. You read my book. Sometimes, When I'm alone at night, I dream of the open window, the curtain blowing gently in the rain, the whisper in the hallway, the sound of small, bare feet padding down the stairs. 2 months later, I got a package in the mail. No return address, no note. Inside was the diary, Clara's diary. Same worn cover, same water-stained pages. But the last entry had